The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the dusty trail, throwing Clara Winslow against the worn leather seat. She clutched the small velvet pouch in her lap tighter, feeling the familiar weight of her mother's ring through the fabric. Outside, the landscape of the Arizona Territory stretched endlessly red rock formations and scattered sagebrush beneath a merciless August sun. Clara had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks from Boston, each mile taking her further from everything she'd known. The other passengers, a minister's wife and a traveling merchant, had long since given up attempting conversation with her. Perhaps it was her height that unsettled them. At nearly 6 feet tall, Clara towered over most women and stood eye to eye with many men. Or perhaps it was the determined set of her jaw, the way she gazed directly at people rather than demurely lowering her eyes. "Too intense," her aunt had said back in Boston. "Too much presence for a proper lady. No man wants a wife who looks him straight in the eye." Her cousin had added, not unkindly, but with the certainty of someone who'd successfully married off 3 daughters. But Thomas Hartwell had wanted her, or so his letters had claimed. For 6 months. They'd exchanged correspondence after meeting briefly at her uncle's shipping office, where Thomas had come to arrange supply contracts for his mining operation out west. He'd seemed charmed by her directness, her education, her refusal to simper and pretend ignorance on subjects she understood perfectly well. "Ash Hollow needs a woman of substance," he'd written. "Someone who can stand beside a man building something important, not merely ornament his parlor." Clara touched the pouch again. Inside was her mother's wedding ring, a simple gold band with 3 small sapphires, worn thin from years of hard work. Her mother had pressed it into Clara's palm on her deathbed 5 years ago, whispering, "For when you find someone who sees you truly, my dear girl." The stagecoach began its descent into a valley, and Clara caught her first glimpse of Ash Hollow. It was larger than she'd expected, perhaps 300 souls, with a main street of false-fronted buildings and steady traffic of freight wagons hauling silver ore from the nearby mines. Dust hung in the air like a perpetual haze, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. As they rolled down Main Street, Clara observed the town's inhabitants, miners with ore-stained clothes, merchants in their aprons, women in practical calico dresses hurrying between shops. A few paused to watch the stage pass, their expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Newcomers always drew attention in towns like this. The stage pulled up before the Ash Hollow Hotel, a 2-story establishment that seemed marginally cleaner than the saloons flanking it. Clara waited for the other passengers to disembark before gathering her skirts and stepping down. Even in her traveling dress, a sensible brown serge that had seemed too plain in Boston but now appeared almost ostentatious, she drew stares. "Miss Winslow." She turned to find a man approaching, but it wasn't Thomas. This fellow was shorter, rounder, with the soft look of someone who spent more time with ledgers than pickaxes. "I'm Gerald Simpkins, Mr. Hartwell's clerk," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "He sent me to, that is, he asked me to meet your stage." Something cold settled in Clara's stomach. "How thoughtful. I trust Mr. Hartwell as well." Simpkins shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if hoping for rescue. "Perhaps we might speak somewhere more private." "Miss Winslow, the hotel has a ladies' parlor." "Whatever you have to say, Mr. Simpkins, can be said here." Clara drew herself to her full height, which put her several inches above the clerk. "Where is Mr. Hartwell?" "He's reconsidering the arrangement. Miss, he feels perhaps there were misunderstandings in your correspondence." The words hit Clara like physical blows, but she kept her expression steady. Around them, she could feel the interest of onlookers, the way conversations quieted as people strained to hear. "Misunderstandings," she repeated flatly. That is, he hadn't quite realized. Simpkins gestured vaguely at her height, her bearing, everything about her that didn't fit the narrow mold of Western womanhood. "Mr. Hartwell has a certain standing in this community. As the owner of the Lucky Strike mine, he needs a wife who will complement his position. Someone more diminutive, decorative, docile. Suitable, Simpkins finished weakly. He's prepared to pay for your return passage. Of course. Most generous, considering... Considering what? Clara's voice carried now, clear and strong. Considering that he invited me to travel 2,000 miles based on promises he now finds inconvenient to keep. A small crowd had gathered, the inevitable audience for public drama in a small town. Clara saw everything in their faces: amusement, pity, contempt. One woman whispered to another behind a gloved hand. A miner spat tobacco juice and shook his head. "Miss, please," Simpkins pleaded. "You're making a spectacle." "Mr. Hartwell has made the spectacle by sending a clerk to dismiss me like an unwanted parcel." Tears burned behind her eyes, but Clara would not let them fall. Not here. Not for these people's entertainment. A burly man in a leather apron. The blacksmith, by the look of him, called out, "Maybe you can trade that fancy dress for stage fare home, miss, or whatever else you've got in them bags." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara's hand went unconsciously to the pouch at her waist, and the gesture wasn't missed. "Got jewelry, have you?" the blacksmith continued. "Well, there's your answer. Plenty of folks here willing to trade coin for whatever baubles you brought from back east." Clara looked at the faces surrounding her, some amused, some pitying, none kind. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She'd eaten little on the journey, preserving her small funds. The return fare Simpkins mentioned would barely cover half the journey, and she had perhaps $2 beyond that. Her mother's ring seemed to pulse against her palm through the velvet. Clara's voice cracked slightly. She cleared her throat. Tried again. "I need food more than jewelry." "Baker's right there," someone pointed. "Sam's always willing to trade." The crowd parted slightly, revealing a narrow shop with Baker's Goods painted on the window. Clara looked at Simpkins, who had gone red with embarrassment, then at the expectant faces around her. The humiliation was complete. All that remained was survival. She walked to the baker's shop with as much dignity as she could muster, the crowd following like spectators at a hanging. The interior was dim and flour-dusted, filled with the smell of fresh bread that made her stomach clench painfully. "Help you?" The baker, a thin man with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down. "I need bread," Clara said quietly. "I have..." She opened the pouch with trembling fingers, drew out the ring. The sapphires caught the light, sparking blue despite their modest size. "This was my mother's." The baker examined it with the eye of someone who'd evaluated many desperate trades. Behind Clara, the crowd pressed closer, eager to see the conclusion of this small tragedy. "It's real gold," Clara added unnecessarily. "The stones are genuine." "Might be worth a week's meals," the baker said slowly, "if you're not particular about what you eat." A week, 7 days to figure out what came next, to find work, to somehow survive in a town where she'd already been marked as unwanted. Clara extended the ring toward him. Then, "She doesn't need to trade." The voice came from behind the crowd, deep and steady. People turned, stepped aside, revealing a man Clara hadn't noticed before. He was tall, taller than her, with broad shoulders and the weathered look of someone who spent his days under open sky. His clothes were practical worn leather vest over a clean shirt, canvas pants, boots that had seen miles of trail. A rifle rested easily in the crook of his arm. "She needs to eat," he continued, moving through the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to being given room. "Not barter away her mother's memory for bread." He reached the counter, pulled out a leather purse, and placed several coins before the baker. "Give her what she needs. Good bread. Cheese, if you have it. Whatever else travels well." "Now see here, Boone," the baker started. "Just fill the order. Sam." The man Boone turned to Clara. His eyes were gray as winter sky, set in a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so marked by sun and wind. "You'll want to keep that ring, Miss. It's no good to anybody else what it means to you." Clara found her voice. "I can't accept charity from a stranger." "Not charity, just sense." He looked at the crowd still gathered in the doorway. "Don't you all have business elsewhere?" There was something in his tone, not threatening exactly, but carrying an authority that suggested it would be wise to listen. The crowd began to disperse, though Clara could hear the whispers starting already. Speculation about Elias Boone and the too tall woman from back east. "I'll repay you," Clara said stiffly, "as soon as I find employment." "No need." Boone watched the baker wrapping purchases with poor grace. "You always stand your ground like that when cornered." "I wasn't cornered. I was managing my circumstances." "That what you call it?" For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his weathered features. Most folks faced with a crowd baying for their humiliation might see it different. "I'm not most folks." "No," he agreed. "That's clear enough." The baker shoved a wrapped bundle across the counter. Boone picked it up, handed it to Clara. "You have a place to stay." "I'll take a room at the hotel." "For $2. He shook his head. "That'll last you one night, maybe two if Hutchins is feeling generous, which he never is. You know anyone in town?" Clara's silence was answer enough. "There's a widow lady, Mrs. Bellamy. Runs a boarding house on Oak Street. She's particular about her boarders, but she's fair. Might have work for someone who can read and write clean. You can do that." "I taught at a ladies' academy in Boston." "Then you're overqualified for most anything Ash Hollow has to offer." He moved toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted harsh across the dusty street. "But Mrs. Bellamy needs help with her accounts. And her eyes aren't what they were. Board and room and trade for keeping her books. Maybe helping with letters for folks who need them written. It's honest work." "Why are you helping me?" Boone stopped, turned to study her with those unsettling gray eyes. "You know what I do. Miss Winslow, Clara Winslow. I'm a hunter. Track game for the mining camps. Sometimes scout for the freight companies. Spent my whole life reading sign, following trails." He paused. "You learn to recognize when something's been driven into a corner through no fault of its own. And you learn the difference between something that'll turn mean from desperation and something that'll stand its ground with dignity." "And which am I?" "Like I said, you're not most folks." He started walking again. "Mrs. Bellamy's is this way. She'll want to look you over. Make up her own mind, but she's got no patience for fools or shrinking violets, so you'll do fine." They walked in silence through the town, Clara clutching her bundle of food and trying to process the sudden reversal of her fortunes. She'd gone from betrayed bride to charity case to potential boarder in the span of an hour, guided by a taciturn stranger who seemed to command respect despite his rough appearance. "Mr. Boone," she said finally. "I meant what I said. I will repay you." "I know you will." He glanced at her, and she caught that flicker of maybe amusement again. "You're too proud not to, but there's no rush. Ash Hollow's not going anywhere, and neither am I." They turned onto a quieter street lined with cottonwoods, their leaves rustling in the hot breeze. At the end stood a neat two-story house, painted white with green shutters. A vegetable garden visible behind a picket fence. It looked like civilization, like order, like hope. "One more thing, Miss Winslow," Boone said as they reached the gate. "Thomas Hartwell's a fool. Any man who'd send a woman like you away because she looks him in the eye isn't worth the spit to curse him. You remember that when the gossip starts." Then he touched his hat brim and walked away, leaving Clara standing at the gate with her salvaged dignity, her mother's ring, and the first faint stirring of something that might have been hope. Mrs. Bellamy proved to be a sharp-eyed woman of 60, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and hands that showed decades of hard work. She'd looked Clara up and down, asked pointed questions about her education and experience, then declared, "You'll do. Room and board for keeping my books and helping with correspondence. Breakfast at 6, supper at 5. No gentlemen callers, no spirits, no scandal." Clara had agreed readily, grateful for the sanctuary. For 2 weeks, she'd settled into a routine that was almost peaceful. Mornings were spent updating Mrs. Bellamy's accounts. The widow owned several rental properties and had investments in local businesses. Afternoons brought townspeople seeking letters written or read, documents witnessed, simple contracts drawn up. Clara charged modest fees, carefully saving every penny. But peace in a small town was always temporary, especially for someone who'd arrived under such memorable circumstances. "That's her," Clara heard the whisper as she walked to the Mercantile on a Tuesday morning. "The one who tried to marry Thomas Hartwell." "Shameless," another voice added. "Coming all this way to trap a man." Clara kept walking, her mother's voice echoing in her memory. "Dignity costs nothing to maintain and everything to lose." The Mercantile was busy, filled with the usual mix of miners stocking up on supplies and townswomen gossiping over fabric bolts. Clara made her way to the counter where Mr. Patterson, the proprietor, was measuring out flour for a customer. "Miss Winslow." His greeting was polite but cool. Since the incident with Hartwell, she'd noticed a distinct chill from the town's established citizens. "What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Bellamy needs a pound of coffee and 2 pounds of sugar. Please." As Patterson turned to fill the order, Clara became aware of a presence beside her. Thomas Hartwell himself, dressed in a fine wool suit despite the heat, his pomaded hair gleaming. She hadn't seen him since her arrival, he'd made sure of that. "Miss Winslow." He didn't look at her, addressing his words to the shelves of canned goods. "I trust you're well." "Perfectly well, Mr. Hartwell. I hope you understand there was nothing personal in my decision. A man in my position must consider his standing." "Yes, Mr. Simpkins made your position quite clear." Hartwell's face reddened. Around them, Clara could feel the store growing quiet as people strained to hear. "There's no need for bitterness. I offered to pay your passage home." "Half my passage," Clara corrected. "And I am home, Mr. Hartwell. Ash Hollow suits me perfectly well." "Does it?" His voice turned cutting. "A woman of your background, working as a common clerk. Surely you'd be happier back east where people understand your type." "My type." Clara turned to face him fully, using every inch of her height. "And what type would that be?" "The type who thinks herself too good for her place, too educated, too refined, too," he gestured dismissively, "too everything for a mining town." The blacksmith from her first day, Jake Morrison, had entered the store and now laughed openly. "She's too much woman for you, Hartwell. Admit it and move on." "Watch your tongue, Morrison, or what you'll have me barred from the Lucky Strike." Morrison spat tobacco juice into the spittoon by the door. "Your silver ain't the only game in town." More men had gathered, drawn by the promise of conflict. Clara recognized the dynamic: the successful mine owner versus the working men, with her as the convenient catalyst. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, "I'm sure we all have business to attend to." "No business more entertaining than this," someone called out. Patterson returned with her purchases, clearly wishing the entire scene would move elsewhere. Clara reached for her purse, but Morrison stepped forward. "Her money's no good here," he announced. "Any woman who stands up to Hartwell deserves free coffee." "I don't need," Clara began. "Course you do," Morrison grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't have to pay, though maybe that ring of yours might buy more than coffee, if you're interested." The implications in his tone were unmistakable. Clara's face burned, but she kept her voice level. "I pay my own way, Mr. Morrison." Proud, Aren't you? He moved closer, and Clara could smell the whiskey underlying the tobacco. Pride's a luxury for them that can afford it. How long you think that Bellamy woman's charity will last? It's not charity. I work for my keep. Do you now? His grin widened. Well, if you're looking for more work, I might have some ideas. Morrison. The voice cut through the store like a blade through butter. Elias Boone stood in the doorway, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Don't you have a horse waiting to be shod? Morrison's bravado faltered. Just making conversation, Boone. Make it elsewhere. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Morrison shrugged and sauntered out. Several other men followed, suddenly remembering urgent business. Hartwell, however, remained. Mr. Boone, he said coolly, I didn't realize Miss Winslow had acquired a protector. She doesn't need one. Boone moved to the counter, his movements unhurried. Patterson, add Miss Winslow's purchases to my account. I can pay, Clara protested. I know you can. He glanced at her, and she caught something unexpected in his gray eyes, respect. But Morrison raised a stink, and now half the town's watching to see what happens next. Let me pay, and it becomes my business instead of yours. The logic was sound, even if it chafed. Clara nodded stiffly. How noble, Hartwell drawled. Though one wonders at your interest, Boone, not your usual type. Is she my usual type? The kind you don't have to look up at. Boone smiled then, a slow, dangerous expression. Maybe I like the view. Someone snickered. Hartwell's face went from red to purple. You always did have peculiar tastes, but then, a man who prefers the company of wolves to people can hardly be expected to understand proper society. You're right, Boone agreed easily. I don't understand a society that imports a woman under false pretenses, then scorns her for having the backbone to stay. But then I'm just a simple hunter. He collected Clara's purchases and moved toward the door. After a moment, Clara followed, leaving Hartwell standing amid the gossiping crowd. Outside, the morning sun was already harsh. Boone handed her the wrapped purchases. I'll repay you, Clara said, for this and the bread. I told you there's no need. And I told you I pay my debts. She hesitated. Though I'm beginning to wonder if I'll ever be allowed to stand on my own feet in this town. You're standing now, aren't you? With you intervening every time someone... I intervene because Morrison's a mean drunk who's gotten too familiar with more than one woman in this town. Had nothing to do with you being able to handle yourself. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Clara asked, Is it true what Hartwell said about you preferring wolves to people? Wolves are honest. They hunt when they're hungry, rest when they're tired, protect what's theirs. No pretense, no false promises. He glanced at her, but they're not much for conversation. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch. And people are... Some people. He stopped at the corner where their paths diverged. You did well in there. Didn't let them bait you into losing your temper or your dignity. My mother always said dignity costs nothing to maintain. Smart woman. He touched his hat brim. Give Mrs. Bellamy my regards. As he walked away, Clara called after him. Mr. Boone, why do you keep helping me? He paused, turned back. You asked me that before. You didn't really answer. Maybe I recognize something. He studied her for a long moment. You ever watch a Mustang that's been caught, some of them break easy, turn into saddle horses? Forget they ever ran free, but others they might let you put a rope on them, might even carry your weight, but they never forget what it felt like to choose their own path. And which am I? You're still here, aren't you? After Hartwell, after Morrison, after all of them trying to make you feel small. That's your answer. He walked away then, leaving Clara standing on the dusty corner with her packages and her thoughts. That evening, as she helped Mrs. Bellamy with her correspondence, the older woman said, "Elias Boone paid your store bill today. News travels fast. Faster than wildfire in drought season." Mrs. Bellamy sealed a letter with practiced efficiency. He doesn't usually involve himself in town matters. He was just... I know what he was doing. The question is, do you... Clara looked up from the ledger she was updating. "I don't understand." "Elias Boone's been in Ash Hollow for 5 years. In all that time, I've never seen him intervene on behalf of anyone who wasn't actively bleeding. He keeps to himself, does his job, asks nothing from nobody." She fixed Clara with a penetrating stare. "Until you..." "He's been kind, nothing more. Kindness from a man like that is never nothing. Girl, men like Elias Boone don't do anything without reason." "Then what's his reason?" Mrs. Bellamy returned to her letters. "That's for you to figure out. But I'll tell you this, he's worth 10 of Thomas Hartwell, whatever the gossips say." That night, Clara lay in her narrow bed thinking about dignity and wolves and men who saw too much with gray eyes. Outside her window, a coyote howled in the distance, and she wondered if it felt free or simply alone. In the darkness, she touched the small pouch under her pillow where she kept her mother's ring. "I'm still here, Mama," she whispered. "Still standing." The coyote howled again, and somewhere in the night, another answered. The weeks passed with the steady rhythm of small-town life. Clara had established herself as a useful member of the community. Despite the lingering whispers, her neat handwriting and head for figures made her indispensable to several local businesses, and even some of the women who'd initially shunned her began bringing their correspondence to Mrs. Bellamy's parlor. It was a Thursday afternoon when Elias Boone appeared at the boarding house door, hat in hand. "Miss Winslow?" he said when Clara answered. "Mrs. Bellamy." The widow, sharp as always, appeared from the kitchen. "Mr. Boone, what brings you to my door?" "I was wondering if Miss Winslow might accompany me to the harvest dance on Saturday." The words hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Clara felt her breath catch. In the 6 weeks since her arrival, no man had shown her anything beyond curiosity or contempt. Now, Elias Boone stood on the doorstep, asking something that would set every tongue in Ash Hollow wagging. That is... Clara found herself uncharacteristically lost for words. "Mrs. Bellamy's eyes gleamed with interest. "The harvest dance, Mr. Boone. That's quite a public declaration." "I'm aware. Are you also aware that escorting Miss Winslow will likely cause talk?" "When has talk ever bothered me?" He looked directly at Clara then, those gray eyes steady. "I'm not much for dancing, but I can manage well enough. And it seems to me you've been in this town long enough to show them you're not hiding." "I haven't been hiding," Clara said, finding her voice. "No, but you haven't been living either. Working and surviving aren't the same thing." He shifted slightly. "If you'd rather not." "I'll go." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to please him. A small smile touched his weathered features. "Saturday evening, then I'll call for you at 7. After he left, Mrs. Bellamy studied Clara with knowing eyes. "You'll need a proper dress." "I have dresses." "You have serviceable clothing suitable for a Boston schoolteacher. You need something that shows these provincial fools what they dismissed." She moved to her writing desk. "I'm writing a note to Mrs. Chen. She's the finest seamstress in 3 counties, and she owes me a favor." "Mrs. Bellamy, I can't." "Yes, you can. Consider it an investment in my business. Can't have my assistant looking dowdy at the biggest social event of the season." By Saturday evening, Clara stood before the mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. Mrs. Chen had worked miracles with a bolt of deep amber silk that complemented Clara's dark hair and brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. The dress was elegant, without being ostentatious, fitted properly to her tall frame rather than trying to minimize it. "Land sakes, Mrs." Bellamy breathed from the doorway. "You look like a queen." "I look like a target," Clara said, smoothing nervous hands over the skirt. "Same thing, sometimes. But tonight, you hold that head high and show them what Thomas Hartwell was too foolish to value." When Elias arrived, he'd traded his usual trail clothes for a clean black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He stood in the parlor, seeming to fill the space, then went absolutely still when Clara descended the stairs. "Miss Winslow." His voice was deeper than usual. "Mr. Boone." They regarded each other for a moment that stretched like taffy. Then he offered his arm. "Shall we?" The harvest dance was held in the town hall, a building that served multiple purposes from council meetings to church services when the circuit preacher came through. Tonight, it had been transformed with autumn decorations, cornstalks, gourds, and lanterns casting warm light. The sound of fiddle music spilled out into the evening air. As they approached, Clara could see people gathering on the front steps, and conversation died as they drew near. She felt Elias's arm tense slightly under her hand. "Second thoughts," she murmured. "Never." He guided her up the steps, nodding to the stunned onlookers. "Evening, folks." Inside, the reaction was even more pronounced. The fiddler actually missed a note. Thomas Hartwell, standing near the punch bowl with a petite blonde on his arm, exactly the type of ornamental wife he'd wanted, went pale. "Perhaps this was a mistake," Clara whispered. "The only mistake," Elias said firmly, "would be letting their small minds dictate your life." He led her onto the dance floor just as a waltz began. Clara had worried about the height difference with most men, but with Elias, it was perfect. They moved together easily, naturally, as if they'd done this before. "You're full of surprises. Mr. Boone, where did a hunter learn to waltz?" "My mother. She said a man should know how to do three things well: shoot straight, speak truth, and dance without stepping on a lady's feet." "Wise woman." "She would have liked you." He spun her carefully. She stood 5'10" in her stockings and never apologized for it. Around them, other couples had joined the dance, though Clara could still feel the weight of stares and whispers. She caught fragments of conversation. "Never thought Boone would. She's so tall. Poor Hartwell. Quite handsome together, actually." "They're all watching," she said. "Let them." His hand was warm and steady on her waist. "You know what I see when I look at this room?" "What?" "Fear. They're afraid of anything that doesn't fit their narrow ideas of proper. You threaten them simply by existing tall, educated, refusing to diminish yourself. And you're not afraid." "Of you." He actually smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "Miss Winslow, I track grizzlies for a living. A tall woman with a backbone doesn't scare me, she interests me." The waltz ended, flowing into a livelier reel. They danced that too, and another waltz after. Clara found herself laughing as Elias proved surprisingly adept at the various steps. For moments at a time, she forgot about the watching crowd, lost in the simple pleasure of movement and music. During a break between sets, they stepped outside for air. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the desert sky. "Thank you," Clara said softly, "for this, for seeing me as more than a curiosity or a problem to be solved." "Is that what you think, that I pity you?" "Don't you?" He turned to face her fully. In the lantern light, his gray eyes were almost silver. "I've watched you for 6 weeks, Clara Winslow. Watched you hold your head high when lesser people tried to make you bow. Watched you work hard and treat everyone with courtesy, even those who don't deserve it. I don't pity you, I admire you." Clara's breath caught. "Elias?" "I know I'm not what you came here for, not educated like you, not refined, but I know my own mind, and I'd like to know you better, if you'll allow it." Before Clara could respond, The door burst open. Jake Morrison stumbled out, clearly deep in his cups, with several other miners. Well, Boone and his Amazon. Morrison's words slurred together. Enjoying the night air, or just can't stand to see normal-sized women inside. Go back inside, Morrison, Elias said quietly. Don't think I will. Morrison weaved closer. Want to get a good look at the woman who thinks she's too good for everyone? Maybe she just hasn't met the right man yet. He reached for Clara. Elias moved faster than thought, his hand closing around Morrison's wrist. Touch her and lose the hand, he said, still in that quiet tone that was somehow more menacing than a shout. Protective, aren't you? Morrison tried to pull free. What's she paying you, Boone? Or maybe you like them tall enough to look down on you. What happened next was too quick to follow. Morrison's arm twisted. There was a sound of impact, and suddenly the blacksmith was on the ground, groaning. Anyone else? Elias asked the other miners. They backed away, hands raised. You'll regret this, Boone. Morrison spat from the dirt. Both of you will. I doubt it. Elias offered Clara his arm again. Shall we go back inside? But the mood was broken. Clara could feel the shift in the atmosphere when they re-entered. Morrison's friends had spread the word, and the looks now held more hostility than curiosity. We can leave, Elias offered. No. Clara lifted her chin. I came to dance, and I'll stay until I'm ready to go. They danced 2 more sets, but the joy had dimmed. When they finally walked back to Mrs. Bellamy's, the streets were quiet except for their footsteps. I'm sorry about Morrison, Elias said. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it I knew bringing you would stir things up? Then why did you... He stopped walking, turned to face her. Because you deserve to be seen, not stared at, not whispered about, truly seen, and because I'm selfish enough to want to be the man beside you when it happens. Even if it makes you a target too. Clara. Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. I've been an outsider in this town for 5 years. The only difference now is I have better company. They stood there in the moonlight, something shifting between them. Then, from somewhere in the darkness came the sound of breaking glass and rough laughter. Morrison and his crew, Elias said grimly. Sounds like they're working up their courage at the saloon. I should see you home. At Mrs. Bellamy's gate, he took her hand, bowed over it formally. Thank you for the dances, Miss Winslow. Clara, she said, if we're to be outsiders together, you should call me Clara. Clara, then, he smiled. And I'm just Elias. Good night. She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the shadows. Inside, Mrs. Bellamy was waiting with hot tea and questions. Well, how was it? Complicated, Clara said, sinking into a chair. But also wonderful. The best things usually are both. The older woman studied her shrewdly. That man's half in love with you already. You know, he barely knows me. Sometimes that's all it takes. The question is, what do you feel? Clara thought about gray eyes and steady hands, about being truly seen for the first time in her life. I don't know, but I think I'd like to find out. Outside, a coyote howled, but tonight it didn't sound lonely at all. In the days following the harvest dance, Clara noticed a subtle shift in the town's attitude. While some still whispered and stared, others began nodding in greeting. A few women even stopped to exchange pleasantries when she went to market. Perhaps seeing her on Elias Boone's arm had forced them to reconsider their hasty judgments. She was updating Mrs. Bellamy's ledgers one afternoon when young Tommy Chen burst through the door, face flushed with urgency. Miss Clara, you need to come quick. What's wrong? Tommy, it's Mr. Boone. Miss, there's been an accident at the Lucky Strike. Cave in. They say he went in after the trapped miners and... The boy's voice cracked. Clara was already reaching for her shawl. "Where?" "They're bringing the injured to Doc Henley's. Ma sent me to fetch you 'cause she said Mr. Boone would want—" But Clara was already out the door, her long strides eating up the distance to the doctor's office. A crowd had gathered outside, miners still covered in rock dust, women wringing their hands. She pushed through, her height giving her an advantage. "Let me through, please." "That's Boone's woman," someone said, and the crowd parted. Inside, controlled chaos reigned. Doc Henley, a competent man despite his fondness for whiskey, was barking orders to his wife and the women who'd come to help. Several men lay on cots, groaning or ominously quiet, and there, on a table in the corner, Elias. His name came out as barely a whisper. He was conscious but pale beneath the dirt and blood. His left leg lay at an unnatural angle, and a gash on his forehead had painted half his face red. But his gray eyes found hers immediately. "Clara!" He tried to sit up, grimaced. "You shouldn't be here." "Hush." She moved to his side, took his hand without thinking. It was rough with calluses but warm, alive. "What happened?" Support beam gave way. One of the miners volunteered. "Would have killed 3 of us if Boone hadn't shoved us clear. Caught him instead." Doc Henley appeared, reeking of carbolic and whiskey. "Legs broke clean. I need to set it, and it's going to hurt like blazes. You might want to step outside, Miss Winslow." "I'm staying." The doctor shrugged. "Your choice. Hold him down, boys." What followed was horrible. Clara had seen injuries before. Life in Boston wasn't without its accidents, but watching Elias bite down on a leather strap while his leg was wrenched back into place tested her composure. She held his hand throughout, felt his fingers tighten to the point of pain, but she didn't let go. When it was over, Elias had passed out. Doc Henley nodded approvingly. "Better that way. He'll be out for a while. Someone needs to watch him. Make sure fever doesn't set in. He lives alone out on Miller's Creek. Doesn't he?" "He'll come to Mrs. Bellamy's," Clara said firmly. "We have a spare room on the ground floor. Now see here." Hartwell's voice cut through the room. Clara hadn't noticed him among the crowd. "That's hardly proper. Miss Winslow, an unmarried woman, offering Christian charity to an injured man who saved 3 lives. Clara stood to her full height, blood still on her hands from holding Elias. "How scandalous." "I'm simply pointing out that you own the mine where safety measures have been neglected," Doc Henley interrupted. "Where support beams that should have been replaced months ago finally gave way. If I were you, Hartwell, I'd be less worried about propriety and more worried about the lawsuits coming your way." Hartwell's face went purple, but he left without another word. They moved Elias carefully, 6 men carrying the makeshift stretcher while Clara went ahead to prepare the room. Mrs. Bellamy took one look at the situation and began issuing orders like a general. "Clean sheets, hot water, laudanum for the pain when he wakes. Clara, you'll need to watch for fever. I'll brew willow bark tea." For 3 days, Elias drifted in and out of consciousness. Clara barely left his side, reading to him when he was lucid, cooling his face with damp cloths when fever spiked. On the 3rd night, the fever broke, and he woke fully for the first time. "Clara!" His voice was hoarse. "I'm here." She leaned forward from her chair beside the bed. "You've been here the whole time." It wasn't a question. "Someone had to make sure you didn't die and leave me to face Morrison alone at the next dance." A weak smile touched his lips. "Practical. Always." He studied her face, seeming to truly see her for the first time since the accident. "You look tired. You look alive, so we'll call it even." "Clara," he shifted, winced. "What are people saying about you nursing me?" "Does it matter?" "To your reputation. My reputation was ruined the moment I stepped off that stage alone. This at least ruins it in service of something worthwhile." His hand found hers on the coverlet. "I'm not worthwhile enough to sacrifice your good name for." "That's not your decision to make." She squeezed his fingers gently. "Besides, Mrs. Bellamy has been here the entire time as chaperone. The proprieties have been observed, more or less." "More or less." "Well, there was that first night when you were fevered and kept calling my name. Rather improper of you." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "What did I say?" "Nothing coherent, just my name, over and over." She paused. "And something about not letting me trade the ring." "Your mother's ring." His eyes sharpened. "You still have it?" "Of course." "Good. Don't ever trade it. Clara, not for food, not for passage home, not for anything." "I won't." She hesitated. "Elias, the miners said you saved 3 men. "I was closest. Anyone would have—" "No, Morrison was there. He ran the other direction." Elias was quiet for a moment. "Morrison's got a family to think of." "So do the men you saved." She stood, began tidying the already neat bedside table to have something to do with her hands. "The whole town's talking about it, about how the strange hunter who keeps to himself risked his life for men who barely speak to him." "They're still men, still deserve to go home to their families." "Yes." She turned back to him. "But why does everyone say you keep to yourself? You've been nothing but kind since I arrived." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, came here 5 years ago after some trouble back in Colorado. Nothing criminal, just complications. Decided it was easier to keep my distance. Let people think what they wanted as long as they let me be." "What changed?" His gray eyes met hers steadily. "You." The simple word hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I should let you rest," Clara said softly. "Stay, please, just talk to me. Tell me about your mother, about Boston, about anything except this damned leg." So she did. She told him about growing up too tall, too outspoken in a world that valued demure women. About her mother, a suffragist who'd scandalized society by teaching her daughter Greek and Latin alongside embroidery. About the school where she'd taught, the girls hungry for knowledge in a world that wanted to limit their horizons. In return, over the following days of recovery, Elias shared his own stories. His childhood on a ranch in Texas, learning to track from a Comanche scout. His mother, tall and proud, who'd faced down bandits with a shotgun while his father was away. The woman in Colorado he'd nearly married until she'd chosen his brother instead. "Is that what drove you here?" Clara asked one evening. "Partly. Mostly it was realizing I'd been trying to be someone I wasn't. Trying to fit into a life that looked right from the outside but felt like a badly fitted coat." He shifted carefully in the bed. "Out here, I could just be no pretense." "I understand that." Clara gazed out the window at the setting sun painting the desert gold. "All my life, people have tried to make me smaller. Hunch your shoulders. Speak softer. Don't be so clever, as if I could shrink myself into acceptability." "I'm glad you couldn't." She turned to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Doc Henley says another week and you can start putting weight on the leg," she said, deflecting. "Clara, when I'm healed, when I can court you properly." "Who says you haven't been—" He blinked. "I've been flat on my back for a week." "Yes, and in that week, you've talked to me more honestly than any man ever has. You've looked at me without trying to calculate how to change me. You've made me feel—" She paused, searching for words. "Feel what?" "Seen, not as a curiosity or a problem, but as myself." "You are yourself," he said simply. "Why would I want you to be anything else?" And there it was, the thing that made Elias Boone different from every other man she'd known. He didn't see her height, her education, her opinions as obstacles to overcome or oddities to tolerate. He saw them as part of her, no more remarkable than the color of her eyes. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Bellamy entered with a dinner tray. "The whole town's buzzing." she announced. 3 of the town council members came by today. They want to give you a commendation. Mr. Boone. Elias groaned. Tell them no. Too late. Ceremony's set for next week. The whole town will be there. She set down the tray with a decisive thump. And it's about time they saw you for who you really are instead of the stories they've made up. After she left, Clara helped Elias sit up to eat. Their hands brushed as she handed him the water glass, and neither pulled away. Will you come? He asked. To the ceremony. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Even though it'll set tongues wagging again? Especially then. She smiled. I've decided I rather like scandalizing Ash Hollow. It's becoming something of a hobby. In that case, Elias said, his eyes twinkling despite the lingering pain. Wait until I can walk again. I have some ideas that will really give them something to talk about. Mr. Boone, are you suggesting improper behavior? Nothing improper about it. Just a man who wants to court a woman properly, even if that woman happens to look him eye to eyes and speak her mind freely. Careful, Clara warned. People might start thinking you actually like those things about me. Let them think it, he said, since it happens to be true. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside the small room, with lamplight casting a warm glow and the remains of dinner growing cold, Clara Winslow and Elias Boone sat together in comfortable silence, building something stronger than the opinions of others, a foundation based on mutual respect, honest words, and the radical idea that 2 people could choose each other exactly as they were. The autumn air carried a crispness that spoke of changing seasons as Clara made her way to the dressmaker's shop. Mrs. Chen had sent word that the dress she'd commissioned was ready, a new creation in deep burgundy wool that would be both practical and elegant for the cooling weather. Miss Clara, Mrs. Chen's daughter, Mary, greeted her warmly. Mother has your dress ready. She's so pleased with how it turned out. In the fitting room, Clara studied her reflection. The dress was masterfully cut, emphasizing her height rather than trying to diminish it. The rich color complemented her complexion, and the fine tailoring gave her silhouette both strength and grace. You look like a queen, Mary said admiringly. Mr. Boone won't be able to take his eyes off you. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. In the month since Elias had recovered from his injury, their courtship had become public knowledge. He called on her properly now, taking her for walks, accompanying her to church services, sitting with her on Mrs. Bellamy's porch in the evenings. Thank you, Mary, your mother's skill is unmatched. As she left the shop, Clara nearly collided with a group of women gathered on the boardwalk. Among them was Mrs. Patterson, the mercantile owner's wife, and Miss Prudence Hartwell, Thomas's younger sister. Miss Winslow. Mrs. Patterson said coolly, How striking you look. Thank you. Clara kept her tone pleasant. Such an unusual color choice, Prudence added, her smile sharp as broken glass. So bold, but then you do seem to favor making bold statements. I prefer to think of it as being true to myself. Is that what you call it? Another woman, Mrs. Morrison, the blacksmith's wife, stepped forward. Some might say it's setting a dangerous example for the young ladies of our town. What example would that be? Why, that a woman can arrive here under questionable circumstances, insert herself into situations where she doesn't belong, and somehow bewitch one of our most eligible bachelors. Clara felt her spine straighten. If by bewitch you mean treat him with respect and honest affection, then I'm guilty as charged. Honest affection? Prudence laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth. Is that what you call pursuing a man while he's injured and unable to resist your advances? That's enough. The voice came from behind Clara. She turned to find Mrs. Ruth Garrett, the minister's wife, standing with her arms crossed. Despite being barely 5 feet tall, She commanded respect. I'm ashamed of you all. Mrs. Garrett continued. This young woman has done nothing but contribute to our community. She helps anyone who needs letters written or accounts settled. She teaches arithmetic to anyone willing to learn. And when a good man was injured saving lives, she helped nurse him back to health with perfect propriety. Ruth, Mrs. Patterson began. I'm not finished. The minister's wife's eyes flashed. If you spent less time gossiping and more time actually observing, you'd see what anyone with sense can, that Elias Boone and Miss Winslow suit each other perfectly. They're both forthright, capable, and kind. The real question is why that threatens you so much. She took Clara's arm. Come, my dear, let's leave these hens to their clucking. As they walked away, Clara heard Prudence hiss, She's turned Ruth Garrett against us too. I don't need defending, Clara said quietly once they were out of earshot. But thank you. Nonsense. We all need allies. Mrs. Garrett patted her arm. I've watched Elias Boone for 5 years. He's been polite but distant, never letting anyone close. Then you arrived, and suddenly he's present. He smiles. He engages with the community. That's not bewitchment, that's love bringing out the best in someone. That evening, Elias arrived for their customary walk. He'd fully recovered from his injury, though he still moved carefully on cold mornings. Tonight he wore his good black coat and had clearly made an effort with his appearance. You look lovely, he said, taking in her new dress. Like autumn itself decided to take human form. Mrs. Chen is a marvel with fabric. It's not the dress. He offered his arm. Though it does suit you. They walked through town as sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. People still watched them, but Clara had learned to let their stares slide away like water off a duck's back. I had an interesting encounter today. She told him about the women outside the dressmaker's shop. Elias's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. This is my fault for what courting me, openly treating me with respect. Clara stopped walking, turned to face him. Elias, I need you to understand something. I've faced worse than small-town gossip. What bothers me is that they think I've somehow tricked you, as if you're not capable of making your own choices. They've always underestimated me, he said quietly. The solitary hunter who prefers animals to people. Let them think I'm simple. I know what I want. And what's that? He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. A life with someone who sees the world clearly and isn't afraid to speak truth. A partner who stands tall literally and figuratively. A woman who makes me want to be better than I am. Clara's breath caught. Elias! I know it's only been 2 months since you arrived. I know you came here with different plans. But Clara, Boone. The shout shattered the moment. Jake Morrison strode toward them, several miners flanking him. The blacksmith had been nursing a grudge since the harvest dance, and from the smell, he'd been nursing it with whiskey. Evening, Morrison, Elias said calmly, moving slightly to put himself between Clara and the men. Don't evening me, Morrison spat. You think you're something special now, town hero walking around with your fancy woman like you own the place? We're just taking a walk. A walk? Morrison laughed ugly. That what you call it, everyone knows what she is. Boone, a desperate spinster who couldn't catch a man back east, comes here thinking she's better than everyone. Watch your tongue, Elias warned, his voice dropping dangerously. Or what you'll knock me down again. Go ahead. Show your woman what kind of man you really are. Show her why you left Colorado with blood on your hands. Clara felt Elias go rigid beside her. What's he talking about? Oh, he didn't tell you, Morrison grinned maliciously. About the man he killed, about why he really came to Ash Hollow? It was self-defense, Elias said quietly. The court cleared me. Court might have, but the dead man's family didn't. That's why you ran. Isn't it couldn't face what you'd done? Clara stepped forward. That's enough. Mr. Morrison. Whatever happened in Colorado, Elias has proven himself here. He saved 3 men, including one of yours. He's shown nothing but honor." "Honor?" Morrison laughed. "You really are a fool. Woman, you think he courts you for love. He needs a respectable wife to clean up his reputation, and you're desperate enough to—" The sound of Elias's fist connecting with Morrison's jaw was like a gunshot. The blacksmith went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. "Anyone else have something to say?" Elias asked the other miners. They backed away, hauling Morrison to his feet. "This isn't over," Morrison slurred through the blood. "Yes, it is." Elias's voice was stone. "You come near Miss Winslow again. You say one more word about her, and we'll settle this permanent. Understand?" Morrison nodded sullenly, and his friends dragged him away. In the silence that followed, Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Elias stood with his back to her, fists still clenched. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "About Colorado?" He turned slowly. In the dying light, his face was all shadows and angles. "Yes, my brother's wife. She made advances. I refused. When she couldn't have me, she told her husband I'd forced myself on her. He came at me with a knife. I defended myself. But he died. And his family. Powerful people. The court cleared me, but they made it clear I wouldn't live long if I stayed." He met her eyes. "I'm not proud of running, but I'm not proud of killing a man over a lie either, even in self-defense." Clara studied his face, seeing new lines of pain she hadn't noticed before. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "I wanted to. I was afraid you'd look at me differently." "I am looking at you differently." When he flinched, she stepped closer. "I'm seeing a man who's carried guilt for something that wasn't his fault, who rebuilt his life in a place where no one knew his past, who risks himself for others and asks nothing in return." "Clara, I'm not finished." She took his hands, uncurling the clenched fists. "Morrison was wrong. You don't need me to clean up your reputation. If anything, I've complicated it. But you court me anyway. Why? You know why. Say it." He pulled her closer, one hand cupping her face. "Because I love you. Because you're the first person in 5 years who makes me want to stop running. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I was before all the ugliness." "I love you too," Clara whispered, past and all. He kissed her then, there on Main Street where anyone could see it was improper and scandalous and perfect. When they finally parted, Clara saw several townspeople staring, including Prudence Hartwell, who looked ready to faint. That'll give them something to talk about. Clara murmured, "Let them talk." Elias took her hand, laced their fingers together. "I'm done hiding who I am or what I want." They walked back to Mrs. Bellamy's hand in hand, the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Behind them, Clara could feel the weight of watching eyes and wagging tongues. But ahead lay something better, a future built on truth, strength, and the radical act of choosing love over fear. At the boarding house gate, Elias paused. "I meant what I said, about you making me want to stop running." "Good," Clara said simply. "Because I'm not going anywhere, and I'd prefer you stayed too. Even knowing what you know, especially knowing." She squeezed his hand. "We all have pasts. Elias, what matters is what we build going forward." He brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. "Then let's build something worth having." As Clara watched him walk away, she thought about the women who'd confronted her earlier, about Morrison's ugly words, about all the ways the world tried to make people smaller. Then she thought about Elias's hands holding hers, about Mrs. Garrett's fierce defense, about the dress that made her look like autumn royalty. Let them talk, she thought, while they waste time on gossip. I'll be living. And with that thought warming her more than any fire, Clara Winslow went inside to write in her journal about love, truth, and the courage to stand tall in a world that preferred you kneel. The whistle's shriek pierced the morning air like a banshee's wail. Clara was helping Mrs. Bellamy prepare breakfast when they heard it 3 long blasts, followed by 3 short ones. The emergency signal from the Lucky Strike mine. "Cave in, Mrs." Bellamy said, her face going pale. "That's the cave-in signal." Clara was already untying her apron. "I need to go." "Child, there's nothing you can—" But Clara was out the door, her long strides carrying her toward the mine. Others were running 2 women with fear etched on their faces, children clutching at their mother's skirts. The mine entrance was chaos, men shouting orders, women crying, the great wheel that operated the lift standing ominously still. "What happened?" Clara asked the first miner she saw. "Tunnel collapse in shaft 3. Got at least 8 men trapped, maybe more." "Who's down there?" The miner rattled off names, but Clara was scanning the crowd for one face. She found him near the mine entrance, already stripping off his coat. "Elias, no!" He turned at her voice. His face was set in grim lines. "I have to, Clara, I know those tunnels better than most. I can get them out." "Your leg, it's only been 6 weeks since—" "My leg is fine." He gripped her shoulders. "Those men will die if someone doesn't go down." Thomas Hartwell appeared, his usually pristine suit already dusty. "Boone, you can't seriously be thinking of going down there. The whole shaft could collapse." "Then you'd better make sure your equipment holds," Elias said coldly. "Since your negligence caused this—" "How dare you? Save it." Elias was already checking ropes, testing equipment. "Get every able-bodied man you can find. We'll need a relay system to move debris." Clara watched him take charge with a natural authority. Men who'd whispered about him for years now jumped to follow his orders. Even Hartwell, faced with the reality of dying miners, fell in line. "I'm going with you." Jake Morrison stepped forward, despite their animosity. The blacksmith was built for this kind of work. Elias nodded curtly. "We'll need your strength. Anyone else?" Several men volunteered. Clara felt her heart constrict as Elias prepared to descend into the darkness. She caught his arm. "Come back to me. Always." He touched her face briefly. "If something happens—" "Nothing will happen. You're going to save those men and come back, and we're going to have a long life together. That's the only outcome I'll accept." He smiled then, that rare, full smile that transformed his weathered features. "Yes, ma'am." Then he was gone, swallowed by the mine's maw along with the other volunteers. Clara stood with the crowd of women, her height letting her see over their heads to the mine entrance, waiting, praying. "You shouldn't be here." Prudence Hartwell appeared at her elbow. "This is no place for—" "If you finish that sentence," Clara said without looking at her, "I will forget that I'm a lady." "Mrs." Garrett materialized on Clara's other side. "She stays. Any woman whose man is down there has the right to wait." The minutes crawled by like hours. They could hear sounds from below shouting, the ring of metal on stone, the ominous groan of stressed timbers. Women clutched each other, some praying aloud, others silent in their terror. Then movement at the mine entrance. Men emerged, carrying a stretcher. The crowd surged forward, but it wasn't Elias, one of the trapped miners, injured but alive. Then another and another. "That's 5, someone counted. 3 more down there." An hour passed. The sun climbed higher, baking the crowd. Someone brought water, but Clara couldn't drink. Her eyes remained fixed on that dark entrance. Suddenly, a rumble from below. Screams erupted from the crowd as dust billowed from the mine shaft. "Secondary collapse," someone shouted. "Get back!" But Clara pushed forward, fighting through the hands trying to hold her back. "Elias?" For agonizing minutes, there was nothing. Then figures emerging from the dust cloud. Morrison first, dragging an injured miner. Behind him, 2 more men, and finally, Elias, a man slung over his shoulders in a fireman's carry. Clara ran to him as he laid the miner down for the doctor. His face was black with coal dust, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead, his bad leg clearly paining him. But he was alive, gloriously, blessedly alive. 8 men, he gasped out. All 8 accounted for. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Clara only had eyes for Elias. She didn't care about propriety or watching eyes. She threw her arms around him, coal dust and all. You beautiful, brave fool, she whispered against his neck. Had to come back, he murmured. You ordered me to... Doc Henley was moving through the rescued men, barking orders. Most had injuries but would survive. The man Elias had carried out was worst off. A beam had crushed his leg, and it would need amputation, but he was alive. You saved them all, Clara said. We all did, even Morrison. Elias glanced at the blacksmith, who was being tended to by his wife. Man might be a fool, but he's brave enough when it counts. As the chaos began to settle, Thomas Hartwell approached. His fine suit was ruined, his face haggard. Boone, that is, he struggled with the words. Thank you. Don't thank me. Fix your mind so this doesn't happen again. Yes, I will. Hartwell looked between Elias and Clara, something shifting in his expression. I owe you an apology, Miss Winslow. I was unkind when you arrived. You were a coward, Clara said bluntly. But today, you helped save lives. Perhaps that's a start toward being better. Hartwell flushed but nodded. As he walked away, Elias laughed roughly. You don't pull punches, do you? Never have, never will. She examined the cut on his forehead. This needs cleaning. Can you walk? With help. She slipped under his arm, taking his weight. Around them, the crowd was dispersing, families reuniting, women crying with relief as they made their slow way toward Doc Henley's office. People nodded respectfully, some even applauding. Heroes welcome, Clara murmured. Don't want to be a hero, just want to be yours. Smooth talker, must be the head injury. Doc Henley cleaned and stitched Elias's wound with his usual efficiency. You're lucky. Boone, an inch to the left and we'd be having a different conversation. That leg needs rest too. You've undone half my good work. Worth it, Elias said, his eyes on Clara. As they left the doctor's office, they found a crowd gathered in the street. The mayor, a portly man named Fitzgerald, stepped forward. Mr. Boone, on behalf of Ash Hollow, I want to thank you for your heroism today. And you, Miss Winslow, for your steadfast support. Clara almost laughed at his delicate phrasing. We all did what was necessary. Indeed, which is why the town council has decided to formally recognize Mr. Boone's service to our community. 2 weeks hence, at the Founders' Day celebration, we'll be presenting you with a commendation. That's not necessary, Elias began. It is. The mayor's tone brooked no argument. This town needs to acknowledge its true heroes. As the crowd dispersed, Clara and Elias made their way slowly back to Mrs. Bellamy's. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. 2 heroic acts in as many months. Clara said, You're making a habit of this. Rather not, getting too old for heroics. 32 is hardly old. Feels older after today. He paused, leaning heavily on her. Clara, when I was down there, when that second collapse hit, all I could think about was you. She tightened her arm around him. I know the feeling. I don't want to waste any more time. Life's too uncertain, too... He stopped walking, turned to face her despite his exhaustion. Marry me. Clara's breath caught. Elias? I know it's not the proposal you deserve. I'm covered in coal dust. I can barely stand, and I don't even have a ring. But I love you. Clara Winslow. I want to build a life with you. Have children who stand tall and speak their minds. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're beside me and go to sleep every night the same way. Yes. I understand if you need time to what? Yes, Clara repeated, laughing through sudden tears. Yes, I'll marry you, you wonderful, infuriating man. He kissed her then, there in the middle of the dusty street, neither caring who might see. When they parted, both were smiling like fools. We're really going to set tongues wagging now, Clara said. Good. Let them see what happiness looks like. They resumed their slow walk, but now there was a lightness to their steps despite the exhaustion. At Mrs. Bellamy's gate, they found the widow waiting, her sharp eyes missing nothing. About time, she said dryly. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in a room until you figured it out. Mrs. Bellamy, Clara protested. Oh, hush. Anyone with eyes could see you two were meant for each other. Now get inside, both of you. Mr. Boone, you'll take the spare room again tonight. That leg needs rest, and I won't have you walking all the way to Miller's Creek. As Clara helped Elias inside, she marveled at how much had changed since that terrible day when she'd stood in front of the baker's shop, ready to trade her mother's ring for bread. Now she had work, a home, and a man who saw her truly and loved her for it. What are you thinking? Elias asked as she helped him settle into a chair. That my mother was right. Her ring was meant for when I found someone who saw me truly. She touched the pocket where she still carried it. I think she would have loved you. I hope so. I want our daughters to be like both of you, tall, strong, unafraid. And our sons. Them too. He caught her hand. We'll teach them all that there's nothing wrong with being exactly who they are. Mrs. Bellamy bustled in with water and clean cloths. Save the family planning for after the wedding. Right now, this man needs cleaning up and rest. But as Clara helped wash the coal dust and blood away, revealing the face she'd come to love, she couldn't stop smiling. They'd face challenges. There would always be those who didn't understand, who thought a woman should be less and a man should be more like others expected. But they'd face them together, standing tall, speaking truth, and choosing love over fear. And that, Clara thought as she watched Elias's eyes drift closed in exhausted sleep, was worth more than all the gold in the Lucky Strike mine. News of the engagement spread through Ash Hollow like wildfire in August grass. By the next morning, Clara couldn't step outside without receiving congratulations, some genuine, others edged with disbelief or disapproval. You've done well for yourself. Mrs. Patterson said when Clara entered the mercantile. The woman's tone suggested she wasn't entirely pleased about it, though one wonders at the haste. When you know, Clara replied evenly, selecting items for Mrs. Bellamy's pantry. Indeed, and I suppose Mr. Boone's heroics yesterday have nothing to do with it. Clara set down the tin of coffee she'd been examining and faced the older woman squarely. Mrs. Patterson, Elias asked me to marry him covered in coal dust and blood, barely able to stand. If I wanted a hero's glory, I could have chosen better circumstances. Then why? Because I love him. Because he sees me not as too tall or too educated or too anything, just as myself. That's worth more than all the heroics in the world. As she left the store, Clara nearly collided with a group of women gathered outside. Among them were Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Garrett, and surprisingly, Mrs. Morrison. Miss Clara, Mrs. Chen beamed. Such wonderful news. You must let me make your wedding dress. Thank you. I'd be honored. Mrs. Morrison stepped forward awkwardly. Miss Winslow, I owe you an apology. My husband, what he said about you, it wasn't right. And yesterday, your man saved lives while Jake ran. It's made me think about a lot of things. Clara studied the woman's weathered face, seeing genuine contrition. We all make mistakes, Mrs. Morrison. What matters is learning from them. still giving folks more grace than they deserve. Mrs. Garrett observed with a smile. It's a good quality in a wife. Speaking of which, I assume you'll want the church for the ceremony? The talk turned to wedding plans, and Clara found herself swept along by the women's enthusiasm. It was a strange reversal. Many who'd shunned her weeks ago now seemed eager to help plan her wedding. That evening, Elias came to dinner at Mrs. Bellamy's, his legs still stiff but improving. They sat on the porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The whole town's talking. Clara told him, apparently, our engagement is the most exciting thing since the last Apache raid. Let them talk. Are you having second thoughts? Never, though I am wondering what changed their minds. Yesterday I was the suspicious Eastern woman. Today, half the town wants to help with the wedding. You're marrying a hero now, Elias said dryly. Makes you respectable by association. Is that what it is? Clara laughed. And here I thought it was my charm and winning personality. That too. He grew serious. Clara, I need to tell you something. About the house at Miller's Creek. What about it? It's not much. 1 room, basic furnishings. I built it for function, not comfort. If you'd rather live in town. Elias Boone, are you trying to talk me out of marrying you? No, I just want you to know what you're getting into. It's isolated out there. Your nearest neighbor would be 3 miles away. Different from what you're used to. Clara turned to face him fully. What I'm used to is being surrounded by people who want me to be less than I am. If isolation means freedom to be ourselves, then I'll take it gladly. You say that now? I'll say it always. She took his hands. But if you're worried, we could add on to the house, make it a proper home. I'd like that. He squeezed her fingers. Maybe a room for your books. A real kitchen, eventually. Rooms for children. Children who'll grow up knowing they can be exactly who they are. With a mother like you, they won't have a choice. They sat in comfortable silence, planning their future as the stars emerged overhead. It was interrupted by footsteps on the porch. Thomas Hartwell stood there, hat in hand, looking uncommonly humble. Miss Winslow, Boone, I apologize for intruding. What do you want? Hartwell. Elias's voice was neutral but not welcoming. To make amends, if possible. He shifted uncomfortably. Yesterday made me realize some hard truths. My mind nearly killed 8 men because I was too proud to spend money on proper supports. And you both of you showed more courage and character than I've managed in my entire life. Pretty words, Clara said. What do you intend to do about it? I'm implementing new safety measures immediately. And he pulled out an envelope. I'd like to make a wedding gift. Consider it an inadequate apology for my behavior when you arrived. Miss Winslow. Elias stood. We don't need your money, Hartwell. I know you don't. That's why I want to give it. He set the envelope on the porch rail. Build something good together. Show this town what real partnership looks like. He left before they could respond. Clara picked up the envelope, whistled softly at the amount inside. This would build quite an addition to your house. Our house, Elias corrected. And we're not keeping it. We're not. Half goes to the families of yesterday's injured miners. They'll need it while the men recover. The other half. He considered. What would you think about starting a school, a real one? Not just teaching letters in Mrs. Bellamy's parlor. Clara's eyes lit up. You mean it? This town needs educating in more ways than one. Might as well start with the children. She kissed him soundly, not caring that they were on the front porch where anyone could see. Have I mentioned that I love you? Not in the last hour. Shameful oversight. I love you, Elias Boone. And I love you, Clara soon-to-be Boone. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. True to her word, Mrs. Chen created a wedding dress that was both elegant and practical ivory silk that complemented Clara's height rather than trying to disguise it. The town rallied around the school idea with surprising enthusiasm, especially among the miners' families who wanted better for their children. Not everyone was pleased, of course. Prudence Hartwell made her displeasure known at every opportunity, and some of the town's more conservative elements grumbled about Eastern ideas. But for every voice of dissent, 2 more spoke in support. The surprise came 3 days before the wedding when a familiar figure stepped off the stagecoach. Clara was at the depot collecting a package when she saw her Aunt Margaret, formidable in traveling clothes and disapproval. "Clara Jane Winslow," her aunt's voice cut across the platform. "What is this I hear about you marrying some frontier ruffian?" Clara's stomach sank, but she kept her head high. "Aunt Margaret, I didn't expect you. Clearly, I received your letter about this engagement. Naturally, I came to talk sense into you." Her sharp eyes took in Clara's simple dress, her sun-touched skin. "You've let yourself go native, I see." "I've let myself go free," Clara corrected. "Come, you must be tired. We can talk at Mrs. Bellamy's." But Aunt Margaret wasn't interested in rest. She demanded to meet Elias immediately, to see what sort of man had ensnared her niece. They found him at the building site for the new school, sleeves rolled up, helping to frame the walls. He straightened when he saw them approach, immediately reading the situation in Clara's tense expression. "You must be Elias Boone," Aunt Margaret said before Clara could make introductions. "I am Mrs. Margaret Thornberry, Clara's aunt and guardian." "Former guardian," Clara interjected. "I'm of age, aunt." Age and sense are different things entirely. She looked Elias up and down like a buyer examining questionable goods. "You're the one who thinks to marry my niece." "I'm the one honored that she said yes," Elias replied calmly. Aunt Margaret circled him slowly. "You're a laborer." "A hunter and scout, also a man who works with his hands when needed, as you see." "Education." "Sufficient to read, write, and recognize quality when I see it." "And you think Clara is quality?" Elias set down his hammer, faced her squarely. "I think Clara is the finest woman I've ever known. Too good for me by any measure, but I'm selfish enough to want her anyway." "At least you acknowledge your deficiencies. Tell me, Mr. Boone, what can you offer my niece? She was raised with advantages, education, culture, society. You offer her what a cabin in the wilderness." "I offer her freedom," Elias said simply. "Freedom to be exactly who she is without apology. Freedom to use her education to teach others. Freedom to stand tall and speak her mind without being told she's too much. Can Boston offer her that?" Aunt Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You presume to know what Boston can offer?" "I know it sent her here looking for something she couldn't find there. I know it made her feel she had to travel 2,000 miles to have a chance at marriage because she didn't fit its narrow molds." "And you think your frontier town is more enlightened?" "No, but I think love is." He glanced at Clara. "And I think a woman like Clara can change any place she chooses to call home." For a long moment, Aunt Margaret was silent. Then, "You'll do, Mr. Boone, you'll do." Clara blinked. "Aunt Margaret." "Oh, don't look so surprised. You think I traveled all this way to stop you? I came to make sure you weren't making a terrible mistake." She smoothed her skirts. "Your mother, God rest her soul, married for love against all advice. It was the making of her. I see something of her happiness in your face. Clara, that's worth more than all the society matches in Boston." She turned to Elias. "You heard her, Mr. Boone, and I'll make the Apache seem like friendly neighbors." "Understood." "Perfectly, ma'am." "Good. Now, where does one find acceptable accommodations in this dust bowl?" The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The church was packed. It seemed the entire town had turned out, whether from genuine goodwill or curiosity. Clara stood in the vestry in her ivory silk. hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "You're radiant, Mrs." Bellamy said, adjusting Clara's simple veil. "Your mother would be so proud." "I wish she could be here." "She is, child. In that ring you're about to put on Elias's finger, in the strength you show every day, she's here." The music began. Clara walked down the aisle alone. She'd refused to let anyone give her away, insisting she was giving herself freely. She saw faces turn to watch, some smiling, some skeptical, all aware they were witnessing something unusual. But Clara only had eyes for Elias, standing at the altar in his black suit. His gray eyes were bright with emotion, and when she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Flatterer," she whispered back. Reverend Garrett performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity, though his wife beamed throughout. When he reached the vows, Clara spoke hers clearly, proudly. "I, Clara Jane Winslow, take you, Ellis James Boone, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, never behind, never ahead, but always beside, to speak truth even when it's difficult, to trust in your strength while sharing my own, to build a life where both of us can be exactly who we are meant to be." Elias's voice was rougher with emotion. "I, Elias James Boone, take you, Clara Jane Winslow, to be my wife. I promise to see you always as you are, brilliant, strong, uncompromising in the best way, to give you freedom to soar while keeping you grounded in love, to face whatever comes knowing that together we're stronger than any storm." When Clara produced her mother's ring to place on Elias's finger, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. He'd had a matching band made for her, simple gold with 3 small sapphires worked into the design. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Garrett announced. Their kiss was tender, profound, a promise sealed before the entire town. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Clara saw the mix of faces, some warming to acceptance, others still skeptical, but all witnesses to something real and true. The reception in the town hall was livelier than expected. Even Prudence Hartwell offered stilted congratulations, though she looked as if the words pained her. Jake Morrison, still sporting a fading bruise from Elias's fist, gruffly shook their hands and muttered something about bygones. "Look at them," Aunt Margaret said to Mrs. Bellamy as they watched the newlyweds dance. "Standing eye to eye, neither trying to be smaller or taller than they are. It's rather perfect, isn't it?" "It's what happens when 2 people see each other truly," Mrs. Bellamy replied. "Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's worth celebrating." As the evening wound down, Clara and Elias slipped away to the wagon he'd prepared for their journey to Miller's Creek, their home now. The crowd gathered to see them off, throwing rice and calling good wishes. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Boone?" Elias asked as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "I've been ready since the day you stopped me from trading my mother's ring," Clara replied. "It just took me a while to realize home wasn't a place, it was a person." As they drove away into the star-filled night, Clara looked back once at Ash Hollow, the town that had rejected her, challenged her, and ultimately accepted her. Then she looked forward, to the man beside her and the life they'd build together. Strong, tall, unashamed, free, exactly as they were meant to be. The following months at Miller's Creek transformed the modest cabin into a true home. Clara threw herself into the work with characteristic determination, turning the single room into a warm, welcoming space, while Elias and hired hands worked on the additions. By late autumn, they had a proper kitchen, a room lined with shelves for Clara's books, and the framework for future bedrooms. Clara also embraced her new role in the community with vigor. 3 days a week, she rode into town to teach at the new school, which had opened with 22 eager students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. The building smelled of fresh lumber and possibility. "Mrs. Boone, is it true you can read Latin?" young Mary Chen asked one afternoon, eyes wide with wonder. "Yes, Mary, and if you apply yourself, you can learn it too," But I'm just a girl, Mary protested. Just a girl. Clara stood to her full height, commanding the room's attention. Mary Chen, never say just about yourself. You are a girl with a mind as capable as any boy's. Your thoughts, your dreams, your abilities matter exactly as much. From the back of the room, 12-year-old Tom Morrison, Jake's son, snorted. My PA says women shouldn't fill their heads with too much learning. Makes them difficult. Clara fixed him with a steady gaze. And what do you think? Tom, do you find me difficult? The boy shifted uncomfortably. Well, you're different, ma'am. Different how? You're tall, and you don't act like other ladies. That's true. I am tall, and I do act according to my own conscience rather than others' expectations. But tell me, Tom, have I been unkind to you? Have I taught you poorly? Have I treated you with anything less than respect? No, ma'am. Then perhaps being different isn't the same as being difficult. Perhaps it's simply being myself. She addressed the whole class. You'll hear many voices in your lives telling you who you should be. Some will say girls should be quiet and boys should be tough. Some will say your dreams are too big or your hopes too high. But I'm here to tell you that you have the right, the responsibility to become the fullest version of yourself. After class, Clara found Mrs. Morrison waiting outside, her weathered face uncertain. Mrs. Boone, I wanted to thank you for what you said to Tom. His father fills his head with, well, with ideas that aren't always kind. Children learn what they see. Mrs. Morrison, perhaps Tom will see something different here. I hope so. The woman hesitated. I also wanted to ask, that is, some of us mothers were wondering, would you consider teaching an evening class for adults who never got proper schooling? Clara's heart lifted. I'd be honored. That evening, she told Elias about the request as they sat by their fireplace, her hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. She hadn't told him yet about the life growing within her. She was waiting for the right moment. Evening classes, Elias smiled. Soon you'll be educating the whole town. Would that be so bad? Knowledge is power. Elias, the more people understand, the less they fear. You're already changing things. You know, I heard Mrs. Patterson defending you at the Mercantile yesterday. Said you were unconventional but effective. High praise from her. Clara laughed. Then, more seriously, I have something to tell you. Oh, he set aside the rifle he'd been cleaning, giving her his full attention. We're going to need those extra bedrooms sooner than planned. It took him a moment. Then his eyes widened. Clara, are you... Yes, come spring. There will be 3 of us. The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of morning sickness she'd hidden. He pulled her carefully into his arms, his usual stoicism completely abandoned. A baby. Our baby. He pulled back to look at her, one hand gentle on her stomach. How long have you known? A few weeks. I wanted to be sure. Are you well? Should you be riding to town teaching? Elias Boone. Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. I'm perfectly capable of continuing my work. I know, but nothing. I won't be confined or coddled. I'll be sensible, but I won't stop living. He laughed, pressing his forehead to hers. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. News of the pregnancy spread quickly. Nothing stayed secret long in a small town. The reactions were predictably mixed. Many women offered congratulations and advice, while others whispered about whether Clara would finally settle down now that motherhood approached. You'll give up the teaching, of course. Prudence Hartwell said at the church social. A mother's place is in the home. Is it? Clara sipped her tea calmly. I rather thought a mother's place was wherever she could best serve her family and community. For me, that includes teaching. But surely your husband... My husband supports me completely. He's proud of the school and the difference it's making. Well, I never... No, Clara interrupted gently. I don't suppose you have. but perhaps it's time to consider new possibilities. As winter deepened, Clara's evening classes began. The first night, only 5 women showed up, approaching the schoolhouse nervously. By the third week, she had 15 regular students, including Mrs. Morrison and, surprisingly, Doc Henley's wife. Never had the chance to finish my schooling. Mrs. Henley confided. Got married at 16, started having babies. Always regretted not knowing more. It's never too late to learn, Clara assured her. One evening, a snowstorm blew in while class was in session. Elias appeared at the schoolhouse door, covered in snow, leading extra horses. Storm's getting worse, he announced. I'll escort everyone home. As he helped the women mount up, Clara heard Mrs. Morrison whisper to another, Never seen a man so protective of his wife. Must be nice, having someone see your worth like that. He doesn't just see my worth, Clara said, making them both jump. He celebrates it. There's a difference. The winter months passed in a rhythm of teaching, preparing for the baby, and building their life together. Clara's belly grew round, but she maintained her schedule, adapting as needed. When riding became uncomfortable, Elias drove her to town in the wagon. When standing for long periods grew difficult, she taught from a chair. You're stubborn as a mule, Mrs. Bellamy said fondly during one visit. I prefer determined, Clara replied, one hand on her back. This baby will be born knowing that strength comes in many forms. In March, just as the desert began to bloom, Thomas Hartwell paid an unexpected visit. He'd changed since the mine accident, less pompous, more thoughtful. Mrs. Boone, Mr. Boone, he greeted them. I have a proposition. They invited him in. Curiosity piqued. I've been thinking about the school, Hartwell began. About education. About preparing our children for a changing world. I'd like to fund an expansion. More rooms, more teachers. Make it a proper academy. Why? Elias asked bluntly. Hartwell had the grace to look embarrassed. Because I've seen what fear of change and difference nearly cost me. My mine almost killed 8 men because I was too proud to listen to new ideas. I rejected Mrs. Boone because she didn't fit my narrow view of womanhood. I don't want the next generation making my mistakes. Clara studied him. And what would you expect in return? Nothing, or rather, only that the school continues to teach all children, regardless of their family's means. And perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps that you might consider naming it after someone who believed in education for all. Who did you have in mind? Your mother. Actually, you've mentioned she was a suffragist, a believer in equality. The Margaret Winslow Academy has a nice ring to it. Clara's eyes filled with tears, pregnancy emotions. She told herself, Mr. Hartwell, I believe you've finally become the man you always pretended to be. Plans for the academy expansion began immediately. The whole town buzzed with excitement and debate. Some grumbled about Eastern influences, but many more saw the opportunity for their children. It was during a planning meeting in early April that Clara felt the first pains. She'd been ignoring twinges all day, but when a sharp contraction made her gasp. Mrs. Henley noticed immediately. How long have you been having pains? The doctor's wife demanded. Since morning, but... Stubborn girl, Elias. Get the wagon. This baby's coming. What followed was long, difficult, and tested even Clara's considerable strength. But as dawn broke on a new day, the cry of a newborn filled the cabin at Miller's Creek. A girl, Mrs. Henley announced, placing the baby in Clara's arms. A big, healthy girl. Like her mother, Elias murmured, his eyes wet as he looked at his daughter. What shall we call her? Hope, Clara said softly. Hope Margaret Boone, for the future, and for the past that made it possible. The baby gazed up at them with gray eyes that would surely darken to brown, already alert and curious about the world. She's perfect, Elias breathed. She's ours, Clara corrected. Perfect is what she'll decide to be. As news of Hope's birth spread, visitors began arriving. Mrs. Bellamy cooed over the baby. Mrs. Chen brought tiny clothes she'd sewn. Even Jake Morrison stopped by with a wooden toy he'd carved. "Congratulations," he said gruffly. "She'll be tall like her mother, I reckon." "I hope so," Clara replied, surprising him. The world needs more women who stand tall. Prudence Hartwell came too, bearing an unexpected gift, a beautiful christening gown. "It was mine as a baby," she said stiffly. "I thought, well, every child deserves something fine, regardless of old disagreements." "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "That's very kind." Prudence peered at the baby. "She has your nose, I think, and her father's stubborn chin." "Heaven help us all," Clara laughed. As spring turned to summer, life settled into a new rhythm. Clara returned to teaching with Hope in a cradle beside her desk, showing her students that motherhood and work could coexist. The academy expansion began, with Thomas Hartwell true to his word about funding. One evening, as Clara sat on the porch nursing Hope while Elias worked on plans for the academy, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From that desperate moment at the baker's shop to this, a home, a husband who saw her truly, a daughter who would grow up free to be herself, and a community she was slowly helping to transform. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked, looking up from his sketches. "About my mother's ring," Clara said. "How she told me to save it for someone who saw me truly. I used to think that meant waiting for someone else's recognition. But really, it meant waiting until I could see myself truly too." "And what do you see?" Clara looked down at their daughter, then at her husband, then out at the vast desert sky full of stars and possibility. "I see a woman who stands tall," she said simply, "in all the ways that matter." Elias reached for her free hand, intertwining their fingers. "So do I." And there, on the porch of their home at Miller's Creek, with their daughter between them and the future stretching out like an unwritten page, Clara Winslow Boone knew she had found something rarer than gold in the Wild West, a place where she could be exactly who she was, and a partner who wouldn't have her any other way. Winter came early that year, bringing with it an unexpected trial. Hope, now 8 months old, fell ill with a fever that wouldn't break. For 3 terrifying days, Clara and Elias took turns holding their daughter, cooling her burning skin with damp cloths while Doc Henley did what he could. "It's the lung fever," he said grimly on the 3rd night. "I've seen it take children before. All we can do is wait and pray." Clara sat in the rocking chair Elias had made, holding Hope against her chest, feeling each labored breath. She hadn't slept in 2 days, hadn't eaten. Her mother's ring caught the lamplight as she stroked Hope's damp hair. "Please," she whispered, not sure if she was praying or pleading with the universe itself. "She has so much life to live." Elias knelt beside them, his hand covering both of theirs. "She's strong like her mother. She'll fight this. What if strength isn't enough? What if? Then we'll face it together." His voice was rough with exhaustion and fear. "But I don't believe we've come this far to lose her now." Through that long night, they talked to Hope, sang to her, told her stories of the future they envisioned. Clara recited poetry she'd learned as a girl. Elias hummed lullabies his mother had sung. When dawn broke, Hope's fever finally began to ease. "The crisis has passed," Doc Henley said, relief evident in his voice. "She'll recover, though it'll take time." Clara wept then, all the fear and tension releasing in great, shuddering sobs. Elias held both his girls, his own eyes wet. Word of Hope's illness had spread through town, and as she recovered, support poured in. Women who had once whispered about Clara brought soup and bread. Men who'd questioned Elias's choice offered to help with his hunting routes so he could stay home. Even Prudence Hartwell arrived with a knitted blanket she'd made herself. "Children are precious," she said simply. All children. I'm glad yours is recovering. The experience changed something in Clara, as hope grew stronger, toddling around the cabin with determination that matched her mother's. Clara felt a new urgency about her work. We nearly lost her, she told Elias one evening. It made me realize how much I want to leave her all the children a better world than the one we inherited. What are you thinking? The academy is wonderful, but it's not enough. These children need to see wider possibilities. I want to bring in speakers, create a library, maybe even start a scholarship fund for those who want to pursue higher education. That's ambitious. When have I ever been otherwise? Elias smiled. Never. It's one of the things I love most about you. Clara threw herself into the project with renewed energy. She wrote to contacts back east, seeking book donations and potential speakers. To her surprise, Aunt Margaret became her strongest ally, organizing Boston society ladies to contribute to the cause. Your work there is important, her aunt wrote. You're proving that civilization and progress can flourish anywhere, not just in established cities. The first major success came when a traveling lecture series agreed to include Ash Hollow on their route. The speaker, Professor Elizabeth Garrett, no relation to the minister's wife, was one of the first women to earn a medical degree in America. A lady doctor, Mrs. Patterson, was scandalized. What's next? Lady lawyers, lady senators, lady presidents, Clara said cheerfully. The world is changing. Mrs. Patterson, we can either help our children prepare for it or leave them behind. The lecture was scheduled for a warm evening in May. The schoolhouse was packed, with people standing along the walls. Professor Garrett, a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, commanded the room immediately. I'm told there was some controversy about my speaking here, she began. That some of you question whether a woman can or should practice medicine. So let me ask you this. When your child is ill, do you care whether the hands that heal them are male or female? When you're in pain, does it matter if compassion comes in trousers or skirts? She went on to talk about her journey, the obstacles she'd faced, the lives she'd saved. But what struck Clara most was when the professor said, I stand here not because I'm exceptional, but because I had people who believed I could be. Every girl in this room has that same potential, if only we let them reach for it. After the lecture, young Mary Chen approached Clara, eyes shining. Mrs. Boone, do you think, could I really become a doctor? If that's what you want, Mary, then yes, it won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. My mother says it's not practical, that I should focus on finding a good husband. Clara knelt to meet the girl's eyes. Mary, there's nothing wrong with marriage. I'm quite fond of it myself. But it shouldn't be your only option. You can be a wife and a doctor, or just a doctor, or neither. The choice should be yours. Later, as they cleaned up the schoolhouse, Elias said, You know you've started something that can't be stopped now. Good, it's about time. The changes in Ash Hollow were gradual but noticeable. More girls stayed in school longer. The evening classes for adults expanded. Even some of the men began attending, initially claiming they were just escorting their wives, but eventually admitting they enjoyed learning. Jake Morrison was one of the surprises. After his wife's persistent encouragement and his son Tom's enthusiasm about school, he began attending the basic literacy classes. Never thought I'd be learning letters at my age, he told Clara one evening, laboriously copying the alphabet. But Tom's been helping me, and it's like seeing a whole new world. It's never too late to learn, Mr. Morrison. I owe you an apology, he said suddenly, for how I acted when you first came. I was a fool. We all have our foolish moments. What matters is growing beyond them. As summer approached, Clara received an unexpected letter from Colorado. Her hands trembled as she read it to Elias that evening. It's from the family of the man from that incident. They want to meet with you. With us. Elias went very still. What could they want after all this time? The letter says they've heard about our work here, about the school. They want to discuss matters of mutual interest regarding education and reconciliation. It could be a trap. It could be. Clara agreed. Or it could be a chance to finally put the past to rest. They debated for days before deciding to invite the family to Ash Hollow rather than traveling to Colorado. If there was to be trouble, better to face it on their own ground. The Dalton family arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, an older couple and a young woman about Clara's age. Clara recognized pain in their faces, but also something else, a weariness with carrying hatred. Mr. Boone, the elder Dalton said, "I'm Frederick Dalton. This is my wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Louise. We've come to talk." They gathered in Clara and Elias's home, the tension thick as desert dust. Hope, now walking confidently, toddled between the adults, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Your brother tried to kill me," Elias said quietly. "I defended myself." The court agreed. "We know." Mrs. Dalton spoke for the first time. "We've always known. Really, James was troubled, violent. We blamed you because it was easier than blaming ourselves for not seeing it sooner." "Then why?" "Because we're tired," Louise interrupted. "Tired of hate. Tired of being known as the family that drove a good man away. We've heard about what you've done here, Mr. Boone, about the lives you've saved, and about your wife's school." She pulled out a bank draft. "This is part of James's estate. We want to donate it to your academy. Call it penance or hope. Maybe both." The amount was substantial enough to fund scholarships for years. "I can't take your money," Elias said. "It's not for you," Frederick Dalton said firmly. "It's for the children, for the future. James is gone, nothing can change that. But maybe some good can come from the fortune he left behind." Clara watched her husband struggle with years of guilt and anger. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. and Mrs. Dalton, Louise, thank you. This gift will change lives. Children who might never have had a chance at education will now. That's a powerful legacy." "Better than the one we've been carrying," Sarah Dalton said softly. They stayed for dinner, the atmosphere gradually thawing. By the time they left the next day, something had shifted. Not friendship, exactly, but a mutual recognition of shared humanity and the possibility of redemption. That night, Elias held Clara close. "You know what you've done, don't you? You've changed this whole town. Changed me. Now you're helping heal wounds I thought would fester forever." "We've changed each other," Clara corrected. "That's what partnership means." As autumn arrived, with its golden light and cool winds, the Margaret Winslow Academy had its official dedication. The original schoolhouse had been expanded into a proper building with multiple classrooms, a library, and even a small laboratory for science experiments. Standing before the gathered crowd, Clara felt the weight of how far they'd all come. In the audience, she saw faces that had once scorned her now beaming with pride. Thomas Hartwell stood with other benefactors. The Morrisons sat with their children. Mrs. Chen watched with tears in her eyes as Mary helped younger students find their seats. "My mother believed in the power of education." Clara began her dedication speech. "She believed that knowledge could free us from the prisons of ignorance and fear. When I came to Ash Hollow, I was lost, desperate, ready to trade her ring for bread. This town gave me a chance to rebuild. Now, with this academy, we give that chance to every child who enters these doors." She looked at Elias, standing with hope on his shoulders. "Someone once told me that I don't need to trade away what's precious to survive. That lesson extends beyond rings and bread. We don't need to trade away our dreams, our ambitions, our true selves to fit into the world. Instead, we can work to make the world fit us, all of us, exactly as we are." The applause was thunderous. As Clara cut the ribbon to officially open the academy, Hope clapped her chubby hands and called out, "Mama, clear as a bell. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Elias pulled Clara aside. In his hand was a small box. "I know you already have a ring," he said, "but I had this made." Inside was a simple gold pendant with 3 sapphires arranged like the ones in her mother's ring. "For the woman who stands tall, who changed a town, who saved my life in every way that matters." Clara kissed him there in front of everyone, not caring who saw. When they parted, she noticed Hope had toddled over to a group of children, already making friends with her mother's determination and her father's quiet confidence. "Look at her," Clara murmured, "already standing tall." "Like her mother," Elias said, pulling her close. "Always like her mother." As the sun set over Ash Hollow, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, Clara Winslow Boone stood with her husband and watched their daughter play with children who would grow up in a world where being different wasn't a curse, but a gift. Her mother's ring caught the light on her finger, a reminder of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled, not in miles, but in understanding of what truly mattered. She didn't need to trade it after all. She'd found something far more valuable, a place where she could be exactly who she was, a love that celebrated rather than diminished her, and a future bright with possibility for all the tall girls and different boys who would walk through the academy's doors. And that was worth more than all the rings in the world. 5 years had passed since the academy's dedication. Ash Hollow had grown. New families drawn by the reputation of the Margaret Winslow Academy and the opportunities it represented. The town that had once whispered about Clara now pointed to her with pride. On a crisp December evening, snow dusting the desert in rare white, Clara sat at her kitchen table, helping Hope with her arithmetic while 2-year-old James played with wooden blocks near the stove. Her 3rd child stirred within her, due in spring. "Mama, why do I have to learn all these numbers?" Hope asked, her brown eyes so like Clara's, filled with 5-year-old frustration. "Because numbers help us understand the world. Sweetheart, they let us measure, build, trade fairly, and solve problems. Like when Papa figures out how many pelts to trade for supplies." Exactly like that. Elias entered, stamping snow from his boots. "Speaking of Papa, he's home with news." "Good news." Clara stood carefully, her hand on her back. "The best kind." He kissed her, then swooped Hope up, making her giggle. "The territorial governor is coming to tour the academy. Seems word of our little experiment has reached all the way to Phoenix." Clara's eyes widened. "When?" "Next month. Thomas Hartwell arranged it. Says if the governor's impressed, there might be territorial funding for more schools based on our model." "Our model," Clara repeated softly. "Who would have thought?" That evening, after the children were asleep, Clara stood before her mirror, brushing her hair. In the lamplight, she could see silver threads among the dark strands, premature, perhaps, but earned through trials and triumphs. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," Elias said from the doorway. "Flatterer, I'm nearly as wide as I am tall these days." "You're carrying our child. That makes you magnificent." He moved behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you happy?" Clara truly happy. She turned to face him. "When I stepped off that stage 6 years ago, I thought happiness meant being wanted, fitting in, finding my place. Now I know better. Happiness is being seen, valued, and free to grow. So yes, Elias, I'm happier than I ever dreamed possible." The next weeks flew by in preparation for the governor's visit. The whole town rallied. Even those who'd initially opposed the academy now recognized its value to Ash Hollow's growth and prosperity. Buildings were painted, streets cleaned, and the academy itself polished until it shone. Clara worked closely with her fellow teachers, for now there were 3 others, including Mary Chen's mother, who taught languages, and, surprisingly, Mrs. Morrison, who discovered a gift for teaching the youngest children. "Never thought I'd be standing in front of a classroom," Mrs. Morrison confided. "Jake still shakes his head sometimes. But he's proud. Says I'm different now, stronger. More myself. You were always strong, Clara said. You just needed the chance to show it. The day of the governor's visit dawned clear and cold. Clara dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep green wool that Mrs. Chen had tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. Her mother's ring gleamed on her hand beside her wedding band. Governor Whitman proved to be a progressive man, interested in education and development. He toured the academy with obvious appreciation, stopping to observe classes and speak with students. In Clara's classroom, he watched her lead a discussion about democracy and civic responsibility. Why should everyone have a vote? She asked her students. Yes, Mary. Because everyone's affected by the laws, so everyone should have a say in making them. Mary Chen answered confidently. Even women, the governor asked, his tone curious rather than challenging. Especially women. Hope piped up from her small desk in the corner where she often sat during her mother's classes. Mama says we think about things different, so we need both kinds of thinking. The governor's eyes twinkled. Your mama sounds like a wise woman. After the tour, there was a reception at the town hall. Clara found herself in conversation with the governor and several territorial officials. Mrs. Boone, Governor Whitman said, what you've built here is remarkable. Not just the academy, but the change in the community itself. How did you manage it? Clara considered her words carefully. By refusing to make myself smaller to fit others' expectations, and by believing others could grow beyond their own limitations. Change is frightening, Governor, but stagnation is death. We chose change. And if the territory were to support expanding this model, then we'd need teachers who understand that education isn't about creating conformity, but about nurturing each child's unique potential. We'd need communities willing to question their assumptions, and we'd need leaders brave enough to support that vision. Leaders like you, before Clara could respond. A commotion arose near the entrance. Jake Morrison burst in, face flushed with cold and urgency. Fire at the Chen's shop! It's spreading fast! Without hesitation, the crowd surged toward the door. Clara moved to follow, but Elias caught her arm. You stay here with the children. That's not stubbornness talking, that's sense. She nodded, gathering Hope and James while others rushed to fight the fire. From the window! She could see the orange glow against the night sky, the human chain passing buckets, the desperate fight to save not just the Chen's shop but the surrounding buildings. It took 3 hours to contain the blaze. When the exhausted firefighters returned, Clara had converted the town hall into a relief station, organizing food and warm drinks. Mrs. Chen wept in a corner, comforted by other women, while her husband spoke quietly with Thomas Hartwell about rebuilding. We'll help, Hartwell was saying. The whole town will. You're part of us now. Governor Whitman, who joined the firefighting efforts despite protests about his safety, approached Clara. His fine clothes were ruined, his face smudged with soot, but his eyes were bright. This, he said simply, is what community looks like. What you've built here goes far beyond education. Mrs. Boone, you've created something precious, a place where different kinds of people stand together. Later, as dawn broke over the damaged but not defeated town, Elias found Clara organizing temporary shelter for the Chen family. The shop's gone, he said quietly. But everyone's safe, and the town's already planning the rebuilding. Of course they are. Clara leaned into his strength. That's what we do here, we rebuild, better and stronger than before. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from Phoenix. The territory would fund 5 new schools based on the Ash Hollow model, with Clara serving as an advisory board member to ensure they held true to the founding principles. You'll be shaping education across the territory, Elias said as they read the letter together. We will, Clara corrected. None of this would have been possible without your support, your belief in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Spring arrived with its usual glory. Wildflowers carpeting the desert, Clara gave birth to their third child, another daughter, whom they named Sarah Margaret, for new beginnings and honored memories. As she recovered, lying in bed with the baby at her breast while Hope read aloud, and James played quietly nearby, Clara found herself thinking about her journey. The desperate woman who'd nearly traded her mother's ring for bread seemed like someone from another lifetime. "Mama," Hope said, looking up from her book, "will Sarah be tall like us?" "She might be," Clara said, "or she might be petite like her Aunt Chen. Either way, she'll be perfect exactly as she is." "Because we don't have to make ourselves smaller to fit," Hope recited, clearly having absorbed this lesson. "That's right, sweetheart." Elias appeared in the doorway, a letter in his hand and an odd expression on his face. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Letter from Boston, from a publishing house. They want to publish your educational theories and memoir about transforming Ash Hollow." Clara stared. "My what?" "Apparently, Aunt Margaret has been sharing your letters with influential friends. They think your story could inspire other communities, other women." I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Elias urged. "Your words changed one town. Imagine what they could do for the country." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, a lively affair with Hope chattering about school, James building towers with his food, and baby Sarah sleeping peacefully, Clara looked around the table with profound gratitude. She thought of her mother, who'd pressed a ring into her palm with words about finding someone who saw her truly. She'd found that and so much more a community transformed. Children given opportunities their parents never had, and a love that stood as tall and strong as the desert mountains. "Penny for your thoughts," Elias said, catching her distant expression. "Just thinking about rings and bread," Clara said softly, "and how sometimes the greatest gifts come from the moments we think we've lost everything." "Speaking of gifts," Hope announced, "Mary Chen says her family's new shop will have a whole section just for books for the academy." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "And Tom Morrison is going to help build new shelves because he's getting real good at carpentry. And his papa is teaching him to read blueprints now that he can read. And—" Clara listened to her daughter's enthusiastic chatter about a town where former enemies worked together, where education was valued, where being different was becoming something to celebrate rather than hide. This was her legacy, not just the buildings or the books, but the changed hearts and expanded minds. Later that night, she began writing her memoir, starting with a simple line, "I once stood ready to trade my mother's ring for bread, not knowing I was about to discover that the most precious things in life can never be traded, only shared, only given freely, only multiplied through love." As she wrote, Elias worked nearby on academy business, occasionally reading passages aloud for his input. Hope had fallen asleep on the rug, a book still clutched in her small hands. James was curled beside her, and Sarah slept in her cradle, dreaming baby dreams of a world where she could grow to be anything she chose. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, but they no longer sounded lonely to Clara. They sounded free, wild, and unashamed, calling to each other across the vast spaces, creating community in the wilderness. Just like she had, just like they all had. Clara touched her mother's ring, then continued writing, telling the story of a woman who refused to shrink, a man who saw her truly, and a town that learned to stand tall together. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was better. It was real, complicated, difficult, and beautiful. It was life, lived at full height. And it was only the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, courage, and transformation in the Wild West. I hope Clara and Elias's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while telling it. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners from around the world and hearing your thoughts about the story. If you enjoyed this tale of standing tall against all odds, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of hope and human resilience in America's frontier. Until next time, keep standing tall, wherever you are.